Jeremy here from Left Brain Logic. One of the things that QuickBooks does not do very well is provide a way for you to void and reissue stale dated checks. Often we'll have checks that were never cashed by a vendor that are months, maybe even over a year old, that we need to void and reissue. The problem is the voiding process that QuickBooks provide, all it does is go in and change the check dollar amount to zero and puts a note in the memo saying that it was voided. The problem is, by doing that, we're actually impacting the financials from that original period where that check was cut, and we generally don't want to do that. So what I want to do is walk you through a process that I use to void and reissue checks in QuickBooks in a way that, one, does not impact the previous period's financials, or the current period's financials for that matter, but then also well documents the transactions so that if we come across any of the transactions that we use to accomplish this, we can easily follow the trail of what happened. So let's go through that process.
I'm working in the Sample Rock Castle Construction Company, and I'm working with the vendor City of Bayshore. You'll notice that the original bill was dated December 15th, 2015, and the check that paid that bill was cut on December 20th, 2015. That check is still outstanding. If I go to the reconciliation, you'll notice it is still in there ready to be reconciled. It has never cleared the bank. So I need to reissue this check. Before I dig into it too much, though, I just want to point out that the City of Bayshore currently has a zero balance here. We're going to put in a couple transactions, and temporarily this balance is going to change, but just know that our goal when we're done with this is for this to return back to whatever balance we started with. So if you happen to be working with a vendor that has some balance here, you may want to just make note of what that balance is before we get started and make sure that when we're all done, this balance returns back to whatever the balance was when we started. So to avoid this check, I'm going to create two transactions in the current period. One, I'm going to duplicate this check, and then I'm going to reverse that with a deposit. So to recreate this check in the current period, I'm going to go into banking and write checks. It's going to assign check number 15106 ordinarily because this is a check that I'm going to print out and send to the vendor. You could say pay later and then actually cut this check. Or while you're in here, you can hit print and print that check so that you have a check to send to your vendor. Because this is just a walkthrough, I'm not going to actually physically cut this check, but just know that this is where you would cut your replacement check, okay? So the check number that I'm going to let it assign is 15106. The date that I'm going to use is 11/30/2021. The amount is going to be the same as the original check. And in the memo, I'm going to make a note. While I'm here, I'm actually going to copy this memo as well because I'm going to paste it in every transaction we create. The account that I'm going to use is accounts payable. That's only because the original check that I'm reissuing this for was an accounts payable check. But just know you can use about any, I would suggest using a balance sheet account, but you can use any account because, again, we're going to create an offsetting deposit that's exactly the opposite of this check. So it's going to go away anyway. But I'm going to go ahead and use accounts payable. The memo, I'm going to paste the same memo here. In the customer, I'm going to enter the City of Bayshore here as well. This way it ties this transaction to the City of Bayshore's vendor account. Again, I'm not printing this check just because I'm just walking through this process. But for you, you'll want to print this check so that you can send it to your vendor. I'm going to save and close. And you'll notice that the City of Bayshore balance now has gone down by $375 because of that check that I wrote. So now I need to write or create the offsetting deposit. So you can go into banking, make deposit. We'll use the same bank account. The date is 11/30/21. The memo, I'm going to paste this same memo in here. Received from is City of Bayshore. From account is accounts payable. Again, we're using the exact same account we used in the check. We're also using the City of Bayshore name in here, again, because we're using accounts payable. If you happen to be using some other account, you don't necessarily need to flag it with the City of Bayshore. It's fine if you do. Just know that's not required. Memo, I'm going to paste that same memo in here as well. And the amount is $375. So when I save and close this, now I've created both sides of that transactions, and the City of Bayshore balance has gone back down to 0. The last thing I want to do is I'm going to open up this original stale dated check, because that memo that I've been putting everywhere else, I want it in here too. So I'm going to paste that memo in here so that we know that this check has been voided and it will not clear the bank. So I'm going to paste that memo in here and save and close. Now there's a couple things that I want to do just to clean up our transactions a little bit. First, you'll notice that this $375 is hanging out there as an open balance. We can clean that up by actually going in here to pay bills. This deposit that I created is listed here as a bill that's ready to pay. So I'm going to check that. And then I'm going to apply this $375. This is actually that second check that we cut. I'm going to apply that second check to that deposit that we created, which that takes it down to a 0 balance. The date I'm going to use here is the same as the check and the deposit that I created. I'm going to leave this as a signed check number. There's nothing for it to do because, again, this is a $0 transaction. I can say pay selected bills and say I'm done. And you'll notice that transaction now goes to 0. The last thing we want to do to clean up is go to the reconciliation. Actually, I already have it open here. There's 4 transactions in here. This first one is that original check that's stale. We want this one to go away from our reconciliations. It's never going to clear the bank. We've created this second check, check number 15106, as the replacement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this old one with this deposit that we created. So those two are going to clear each other out. This last transaction, this is that $0 transaction that we just created to reconcile those, or to pay that bill that we created when we created this deposit. I'm going to clear that as well. So all 3 of these go away. The only one that's outstanding now is this new check that we just created. So, and that is the check that we expect to clear the bank. So once we send that check to our vendor and the vendor deposits it, this check will clear the bank, and then all of them will go away. Okay, that's all there is to it. That check has been voided and reissued. Check number 15106 is available to be sent to your vendor, and when it clears the bank, it will be available to reconcile in your bank rec.